Well, I always think, Tulsi, that the exciting part is Q&A.
I agree.
And we can get into the good stuff, and inquiring minds want to know.
All right.
All right.
Let's go.
All right. What is your stance on the Second Amendment?
I support the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment, and I know that those may be easy words to say and words you may hear, but you know, I can tell you that my understanding of the Second Amendment has grown, especially over these last 5 years. I grew up in Hawaii, much like California. It's a highly restrictive state when it comes to gun laws. First time I shot a rifle was when I was at basic training with the Army. But over these years, you know, I had heard and I had read about how the Second Amendment was so much more than just a right to self-defense, a right for be able to own guns for recreational shooting or other purposes. It really was intended to serve as a check on the power of an increasingly tyrannical government. It seemed like a far-off, unrealistic future for a long time, until these last 4 or 5 years, when it has become very real what a tyrannical government in our lives in this present day actually looks like.
With just following up on that a little bit, our founding fathers knew that it was a checks and balance, just, you know, sitting in the corner of your cabin or your house, and we saw countries like Australia, very much like Hawaii and its restriction, that they disarmed the people in 2016. And it's always the step towards a totalitarian regime because they must disarm the people. Yeah. It's crazy.
That's exactly true. And you also just see, and again, I saw it and I experienced it throughout my time in Congress, where it almost always never happens immediately and overnight. These incremental restrictions. I just learned from my friend Matt, who drove me here tonight. He's a veteran of the Marine Corps. I don't know if he's in here or not, but he was telling me about some of your laws here. When I was asking him, he owns a gun store. And I said, oh, well, do you carry this gun? And he said, oh, no, I'm not allowed to, because you're only allowed to carry whatever the state has approved, and if you try to get another model of like the latest Glock added to that list and it gets approved, you got to take 5 others off the list. Wow. Yeah. And so that's quite a cheeky way of trying to reduce the numbers of guns that you are allowed as law-abiding citizens to own in California. My point being that there are these little things that are being done at the state level and at the national level where they say, oh, we just have to do this one little thing because safety, but when in fact their real motive is to disarm the American people.
And isn't it tragic that the political leaders use they're terrible, tragic shootings, yes, oftentimes at schools, and they use that to promote their agenda to enforce gun laws, but gun laws only work for honest, law-abiding citizens. All the criminals can get guns. Yeah. So it only restricts people that would want to protect themselves.
Yeah. It is, and you know, it's unfortunate when we see other murders that are being done with other weapons, but it does prove the point that if you have someone who is intent on harming or killing others, they will find a way to do it. I was overseas recently with the Army in the Pacific, and we were doing our Army Reserve 2 weeks of annual active duty, and I was in a very small Pacific Island country where there's no guns allowed at all, but this country has a string of different islands, and I was taking a few of my soldiers to drop them off in each of these little spots. They're civil affairs soldiers, and I heard as I was going, everyone was telling me, when I go to this one spot, they're like, don't get off the plane. It's like, why? They're like, that place is dangerous. It's the only island in this country where they actually have like 22 murders a year, and the population is very, very small. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on there? And they're like, well, they have no guns, but they take these pieces of iron barbs, sharpen them, and deploy them with slingshots and hit people in the neck and their jugular and actually kill people. Like, it's a pretty gruesome situation. So I was telling my soldiers, like, you better check in with me every day. Don't go to this part of the neighborhood. But it just proves the point of humanity for all of time. If you seek to do harm to others, you will find a way to do it.
What is your take on the woke agenda and how it erases women in this? It's crazy to me that the left that has always stood for women's rights, I'm wondering, where are all the feminists for these precious girls in athletics that have to go, and men are taking their trophies? It just seems outrageous.
Yeah, again, I mean, it goes to fear, it goes to lack of care, and being disconnected from all forms of reality. I have friends who are former colleagues of mine who have little girls. I don't know. I honestly don't know how they can remain silent in the face of this. Maybe it will take their daughter, being kicked off or being afraid to go and play on the volleyball team because she'll know that she's playing against a far stronger and faster boy with long hair. I can tell you that there are a lot of members of Congress who, they say, well, this is not a big issue because it only affects a couple of people, so we shouldn't even really be talking about it. None of them have children or grandchildren who are of age, and it just, frankly, it points to a lack of care and being disconnected from the very real reality that so many parents, young girls and women, are facing across the country. Obviously, Riley Gaines and so many others who are now finding their voice and courage to speak up is such an inspiring thing to see, and they are the real feminists of our time, and that is how we combat this woke agenda. This whole woke thing, it just does not make sense. It defies truth. It defies science. It defies all that we know to be real. But we fight back with the truth. We fight back with substance because they don't have either on their side.
Isn't that you're touching on the thing that is the basis for the entire woke agenda, is that it is disconnected from reality. And we used to pretend when we were children, but now they demand that we step into their non-reality with them. And if we don't, we're haters. No, it's like, no, tolerance is, I guess you can do you, man, but I'm not a part of your delusion and your disconnection with reality.
That's such an important point, to make that distinction between kind of tolerance, a live and let live mentality, like, hey, you're an adult, you're a free American, you can live your life the way that you choose, to what the woke mobs and the Democrat elite demand, which is far more than just tolerance, far more than acceptance even. It is, you will celebrate, you will walk in the march, that's right. You will call us by what we want to be called. It is a complete involvement in all that they are selling. We look to some countries in Europe to see where this goes. When you have language being changed across our laws and in our government, and how once that change happens, what is the next logical step? Well, if the government now refers to women as what's the latest term? Birthing person, chest feeder. I mean, you go down the list. You can see how if somehow you are not using that terminology, then you could be accused of harassment. And there are countries in Europe that are already, that if you don't call someone by the pronoun they want to be called, they can charge you with the crime, an actual crime of harassment. This is where this path goes.
And we were just following up on that, quite terrified when Homeland Security said they were going to start their own ministry of truth, right? disinformation, and the outcry was so, I mean, it just dropped like a hot potato. But it is so Orwellian. It's just like reading 1984, which it's almost like the book is prophetic about our time right now. It's the ministry of truth is the opposite of truth.
The thing with that was, they publicly dropped it because the outcry was so great, which was awesome to see, but we shouldn't be under any illusion that they dropped their cause, their agenda, and their execution of what that ministry of truth was intended to be. They are still doing it. I guarantee you they are still doing it. And we know this because they're using big tech and directing the FBI to tell big tech, okay, well, here's who the accounts we want you to censor, and here's the ones that are okay to amplify. So they're already carrying this out just in a way that lacks total transparency.
This isn't on my list, but this lawfare thing now is the way to destroy somebody's life. Like if I'm a person of limited means, right, all they have to do is just charge me. It doesn't matter if the charges are real. I mean, this alone is a terrifying thing, don't you think? I mean, what's your thoughts about that?
You look at what happens in banana republics and autocracies and dictatorships, and you see how, obviously you see what's happening with President Trump. It's on television. It is the new reality TV show now. But there are a lot of folks who are experiencing the brunt of this, whose names you'll never hear and who will never have their face on the news or their story told. But they are also being targeted, whether it be by the IRS or whether it be by the Department of Justice or any one of the law enforcement agencies. We know about, I was at the gym in Hawaii. I live close to a Marine Corps base, went to the Marine Corps base, work out early in the morning, and I saw a guy I'd met once before, and he came up, he had his 14-year-old son with me. He's a Polynesian Samoan man. And he started talking to me. He's like, yeah, the FBI came and knocked on my door. I was like, why? What'd you do? He's like, well, I took my son. We were out on the lawn of the Capitol on January 6th. That the FBI went and tracked him down in Laie, in this rural community on the island of Oahu, because he said, I wanted to show my son what democracy looks like. They didn't enter the building. Maybe that was the reason why they weren't arrested. I told him, well, maybe it was because your skin is brown and you don't really fit the whole white supremacy narrative. Who knows? But the fact that our government, how did they know? Well, he got on a plane and he flew there, and they're geo-tracking cell phones and flight records to know who was in Washington, D.C. during that period of time. And so you look at how our FBI is being deployed. To go and talk to this Samoan guy and his kid in a conservative Mormon family in a small town in Hawaii months after January 6th with no other information other than the fact that he and his 14-year-old son were there. This is what our resources are being used for. What about the Hezbollah sleeper cells that are in our country? What about the millions of people crossing our border and we have no idea who they are?
They said they're going to expand even more, another 1,000 indictments. I was at the rally, walked past the Capitol on my way to the subway station, the train station. And they get that ring big enough, and I'll have a jail ministry. It'll be amazing.
You'll change a lot of lives.
That's right. That's right. Everybody needs Jesus.
I'm glad you've got a sense of humor. Yes.
All right. How would you address people in the room who are disenfranchised by not just the Democratic Party, but the Republican Party, the Uniparty, and you were in Washington for 8 years? And tell us about the disillusionment of how things really work from what we think in an ideal constitutional republic by representation work.
One of the things that I quickly learned after, there were a few things, but one of the things that I saw was that the decision-making power really lies in the hands of about 4 people, in the House of Representatives specifically. So, I ran for Congress. I represented the Hawaii 2nd Congressional District for 8 years. And the job title literally is representative. We have 2 in Hawaii. I was one of those two. I had very little ability to get my legislation brought to the House floor for a vote. You had to be in the favor of whoever was in leadership on the Democrat side or the Republican side in order to get your legislation heard on the House floor. I was able to pass some legislation, but as you can imagine, some of the legislation that was outside the norms of Washington, which is what is accepted by the establishment, the status quo, the permanent Washington. They will never see real solutions see the light of day if they don't benefit one party or another. We tried to pass some rule changes while I was there that said, okay, well, let's democratize this process a little bit so that the people's voices have an opportunity to be heard. If I introduce legislation, for example, and I can get 1/3 of the members of the House of Representatives to support it, to co-sign my legislation, let me do the work to go and make my pitch to my colleagues, tell them why this is a good bill, why it solves a very specific problem, and then let it pass or let it fail. Let me do the work that I was hired to do by my constituents in Hawaii. There's very little appetite for that. Why? Because it takes away that control and that power from those few people who hold on to it and who get to decide what legislation is heard and what is not. It's unfortunate that too often we see huge divides between the party leaders and members on both sides of the aisle on many issues, but the issues they seem to come together around are the issues of, okay, well, let's go wage a new war, or let's go fund another proxy war, or let's go and use the excuse of national security to further take away more of our freedoms, creating this false choice for us. And it happened to me when I was in Congress trying to bring about some reforms to legislation to protect our civil liberties. They say, well, you must want more terrorists to come and attack our country because you want to protect these civil liberties, telling us that we have to choose, that we can either be free or we can be safe. This has been happening for a long time. We saw it in the days and weeks and months after 9/11. It has been happening continuously since. I mention it just as a warning because we should never have to choose. That is a false choice. And it is our leaders' responsibility to ensure our national security and to defend our liberty. They will call us traitors for holding that position. But in my opinion, those who don't care for the Constitution and take away our freedom for their power, they are defying our Constitution.
Yes. C.S. Lewis said, those who trade their liberty for security get neither. And that's, but they amp up the fear. Oh, we're going to prevent another alarm. Let me see your phone records, your email. I mean, it's so intrusive. Yes. And like you said, they'll label you as a traitor. Oh, you don't care about the nation? Yes. No, just stay out of my business, man. That's an American trait. It's an American trait, right? What is your opinion on the lockdowns and what they did to our country in Hawaii?
We had it pretty bad. We had it pretty bad. Almost, I think, it's maybe a competition of who had it worse between your state and ours. I'm a big ocean person. I know that might come as a shock and surprise to you. I love surfing, and we live a few blocks from the ocean, and my morning routine when I'm home is I'll go and work out and then I'll go jump in the water. So I went down there one day, and the rule in Hawaii was, well, you're allowed to go into the ocean, you just can't hang out on the sand. You can't stop. You can't stand, you can't sit, you have to be in motion walking across the sand, and then you can get in the water and then you're good. I think they knew if they tried to keep people from getting in the water, there would be anarchy in the streets. There would absolutely be anarchy in the streets. It's just, it was so ridiculous. So I went down there and I was in the water and I was swimming one morning and I saw this woman that I see on the beach all the time. And she's a little older, but you could tell she had her routine as well. So she couldn't sit on the beach. So she went and she had her little boogie board. And so she went and she put her boogie board on the sand and then went and sat on her boogie board. And then if she heard the police's four-wheelers coming down, then she would pick up her boogie board and then go knee-deep in the water and just stand there with her boogie board and then wait for them to pass. It was just so stupid. It was such a joke. And everybody saw it, and I felt bad for our law enforcement because they were the ones who were being told to go and enforce these things, and seeing their neighbors and friends and like not being able to explain how this actually served public safety or public health. I was very, very outspoken and critical of our governor at that time, just because none of it made sense. None of it made sense, and people's individual liberties and freedoms were absolutely being encroached upon. There's a longer story of how there was some retaliation against me for that at the local level and at the state level. But people, I think that the silver lining in all of this is that a lot of people's eyes were opened, and seeing how when people got a little bit of power, maybe in the beginning it was well-intentioned, and then it just blew out of control. And again, accountability. These people are in power only if we allow them to stay there.
All our constitutional rights are violated through the pandemic. They shut down businesses. They destroyed businesses. They'll never open again. And yet, through that, the ugly monster of the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the money of big pharma and the sheer power and dominance, I think shocked us all, kind of, grabbed us by the throat. And in retrospect, after seeing it all, I mean, whether it's Wuhan lab leaks and all that stuff, from your experience in Washington, what do you make of all of that? Was it a practice run of tyranny? Was it, what I mean, all the things that we could think about, it was global. We've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. I want to highlight what you're talking about with the pharmaceutical industry, because it is obviously at the heart of the government's response to this, and how it was that I remember seeing Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary at that time.
Oh, wait, let's circle back. Circle back.
Exactly. Circle back. One of the reporters asked her about whether or not the White House would be recommending to Americans, knowing that those who had maybe were overweight or who had compromised immune systems or who were unhealthy would be more susceptible to extreme symptoms if they were to get COVID. So are you going to include in your daily health briefing to people that you should exercise and try to eat healthy and strengthen your immune system, and most people are vitamin D deficient, should take some vitamin D, and so on and so on. And she couldn't just say yes. Yes, try to be healthy. Yes, exercise. Yes, eat nutritious food. Her response was, well, we will issue the recommendations of the CDC, and the CDC's recommendation is for everyone to get vaccinated. And that was it. That was it. It's hard to take people like that seriously when they aren't able to just use their common sense and say what is obvious and staring us all. Yes, be healthy. That is just a good rule all the time, especially when you're dealing with the virus. But why was it? Why were they so constricted in their messaging? Why were they so controlled in their messaging? Why were they so intent on these mandates, firing people, first responders, doctors, nurses, people in the military for not taking the vaccine? even now, I just talked to somebody a couple of months ago who was a firefighter who was still let go because he hadn't gotten the latest, I don't even know what number, booster shot they're on now. It's to see the blatant loyalty to the pharmaceutical industry at the expense of the health and well-being of our people and our society really tells the whole story. The pharmaceutical industry spends more money on lobbying in Washington, writing checks to members of Congress, than they spend on their marketing campaigns and ads on television. And if you're still one of those people who watches television, you see how many, well, it's almost every commercial break you see one of those ads come on. Every commercial break. And my husband's a cinematographer. Those are not cheap ads to make. And so I've often thought, gosh, they must spend a lot of money on these ads, like during prime time when the best shows are on. They spend more on lobbying politicians in Washington to earn their favor, to earn their votes, than they do on those marketing campaigns to us. That's who their bosses are. So when you wonder why more people don't speak up about this, and I personally know members of Congress who had the audacity to want to run a campaign based on reducing the cost of prescription drugs, get told by their pharmaceutical industry lobbyist friends, if you run an ad with that message in it during your campaign, the $5 or $10 million that we had set aside to help you in your election, we're going to pull it. What do you think this person did? They didn't run the ad.
We've already touched on a little bit of speech, but the freedom of speech, and I can totally disagree with you, but I'll fight to the death to give you the freedom to be stupid. You know what I mean? You can say what you want. I mean, that's freedom of speech is the ability to have free thought and free speech, and then, you know, just the First Amendment, freedom of religion. And here in California, I mean, the strip clubs are open, the pot shops are open, the liquor stores, they're all essential businesses. All the big box stores are open, all the mom and pop shops are shut down, but church is non-essential. We can't sing if we come together, even though the Lord says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. We can't sing. And so we opened up during that and were sued by the county supervisors and had $284,000 in fines. And it's amazing that the Constitution was so blatantly set aside. But we're really, I mean, we're a Judeo-Christian, we have a Judeo-Christian history, but right now the country is sliding to such a almost hostility towards God and Judeo-Christianity. Just speak to those issues that you're seeing and observing from your perspective.
Yeah, I dedicated an entire chapter in my book specifically to this because of how serious it is and what the consequences are when we live in a society where we have people in our government who are trying to remove God or any mention of God from all facets of our public life. And when in particular, and I mentioned these, the fear of being called Islamophobes for taking on radical Islam, and yet there is no fear of our own FBI, someone in the FBI saying, well, you know, we have to worry about those radical traditional Catholics, and we have to start developing sources in these churches. So how do you know where to go and which, you know, who is suspicious in these Catholic churches? Well, what did their memo say? They said, well, it's people who like to go to a traditional Latin Mass. There are too many examples of how they are targeting particularly Christians in this country without any fear or concern or even a feeling like they have to cloak it behind something else. some of the target words that have been revealed that they have for being flagged, whether it's in the IRS or some of these other agencies. It is deeply, deeply concerning. Again, it should be as concerning to an atheist as it is to a Christian. Because if one day this is you and the next day it's going to be someone else, it does not take a leap of imagination to draw a through line from this effort. And I saw it through different Democratic conventions I went to, different events that I went through. People opposed to even mentioning one nation under God when saying the Pledge of Allegiance. When you take God out of our society, it's no wonder you have people saying, well, you know, we can't call someone a pedophile, we have to call them a minor attracted person. It's no wonder that now we live in a society where you got a whole bunch of people who believe that any person can become, any man can become a woman just by saying it or thinking it or feeling it. That these things that are rooted in objective truth are completely cast aside. And so when you cast aside the truth and you cast aside God, what are you left with? An unraveling of the spiritual foundation of this country and our society. And no guardrails on what is right and what is wrong. Who gets to say? And it is often, as we are seeing, the most vulnerable among us, our kids, who are suffering the harshest consequence of this in a way that's impacting them in ways that are difficult to measure.
Doctors, parents, pastors, experts were censored for sharing their opinions. They passed a law, it went through the California legislation, that if a doctor spoke publicly outside of the state narrative, they were going, their license, they would come under review and possibly lose their license. Governor Newsom signed, and in the preamble of it, this law is probably unconstitutional, but we need to protect, and went on to, you know. It
said that?
Yes. That was his words, and it was challenged immediately. It went, I mean, it was, they sued them day one, it was going to come out. It was we don't know, it's still in the courts. But is it our imagination, or is the Biden-Harris administration, or people that are progressively left, that they really have no value? It's almost like, you know what, the Constitution's in my way. And it's a living document, which means, you know, they push it out of the way when it doesn't suit them. And we are the longest running country, right, under this document, 250 years almost, and it works very well. The principles work very well. And you have left the Democratic Party, but are these things as startling to you? I'm older, but you know, from my generation, I woke up in 2020 and said, what happened to my world? What happened to my country? How much are you in observing these things?
Yeah, it's not your imagination at all. This is exactly
I feel so validated right now in this moment.
This is not a dream.
This is not a dream.
This is exactly what's happening. They are circumventing the Constitution at every turn. If the Supreme Court rules in a way that they don't like, such as with the forgiveness of billions of dollars of student loans, the Supreme Court said no, and Joe Biden said over and over, he said, screw the Supreme Court, I'm going to do it anyway. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that, hey, guess what? In an election, it's the American people who get to decide who they want to vote for, not some judge in Colorado who says that Donald Trump is not allowed to be on the ballot, or some elections officer in the state of Maine, or pick any one of these individuals in the 32 plus states that tried to get him removed from the ballot. When the Supreme Court unanimously ruled and said, no, voters get to decide who they want to vote for. You saw the response from people like David Axelrod and other high-ranking people, influential people in the Democratic Party, the pundits on MSNBC, and everyone else are like, oh no, the court has failed to fulfill its most fundamental responsibility in upholding the Constitution. Oh no, we're just going to have to leave it to the American people now to save our democracy. And how? How will the American people, how is the only way the American people save our democracy? By not voting for Donald Trump. The mindset is so twisted at this point that they really truly believe, and I know many of these people in their hearts, they really truly believe that their actions are justified, that they are righteous, and that that in order to save our country and save our democracy from someone they believe in, Donald Trump, will become a dictator-in-chief, that if he is elected, it will be the last election our country ever sees. And so they really believe that they have to destroy our democracy by taking away our right to make our own choices, because we might make the wrong choice in their book, that they've got to destroy democracy in order to save it. I feel like we've heard this before in other parts of the world, where you have people in power who believe that they are justified to take a certain action or to silence a certain people or to persecute another group of people because they are acting in the best interest of the greater good. So when you look at that mindset, you can see how dangerous it is and where that path has the potential to lead. It's why we have a constitution, to provide those guardrails against those who start to think that they are the savior of the people, which at a spiritual level, at a fundamental level, that is really what is happening here. We were talking earlier about who gets to decide what is true and what is false, who gets to decide what is free speech and what is not. These are people that, whether they realize it or not, they are trying to put themselves in being in a position of God, of being the ultimate authority, who gets to govern over and rule over the people.
And isn't that the real, I mean, for a Judeo-Christian ethic, God is supreme, fear God,
Yes.
Love your family, love your country. But to a progressive person that's archaic, we're atheist or agnostic, whatever their mindset is, then the government rises to be the supreme power in their worldview, because everybody has a worldview.
Yes.
And it seems like there's a lawlessness to them. They didn't protect the Supreme Court justices when they were going, it's a federal crime to do what they were doing to their, to intimidate the justices, but there was no protection for them. They let the mob, even almost tongue-in-cheek, sick them after them to put pressure on them. It's lawless.
Well, that's the thing, is when you throw away the Constitution, you throw away any concept for the rule of law. You start enforcing laws arbitrarily, where the rest of us are locked down. You're not allowed to go to church. You're not allowed to worship. But if you're walking in a BLM march with another 100,000 people in very close proximity, screaming and shouting things, you're not allowed to sing in church, but you're allowed to scream and chant in this BLM march, with public health officials saying, well, we think that the cause is more important than the rules that they put in place around COVID. These are all different examples that prove the point that when you remove that foundation of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, you remove the guardrails of objective truth, you are left with whatever they say goes. It is a constantly moving target, and it's not grounded in anything other than what they believe is good for their power ultimately.
Yeah. So the great concern through observing all of that was what all totalitarian regimes, they pack the court. Yeah. Has it been a concern of yours to see, because of the pressure?
Huge concern.
Yeah.
It's a huge concern, because it's not a theory that this is the plan.
This is not hyperbole. When I say these things, it's not hyperbole.
No, that's also a Joe Biden saying. This is not hyperbole. Have you not heard that before? So many times. I think about, because I say that and I was like, I got to stop saying that because this is no joke, folks. The plan is to pack the courts, and the plan is to expand the courts so that they can pack the courts. No respect for our institutions, no respect for the rule of law. If they don't get their way, they'll throw a tantrum and try to destroy these institutions that have been put in place. This is, you know, as we go through these different list of issues, these are the things that drove me to leave the Democratic Party, because how could I, as someone who both as a soldier, as well as someone who served in Congress for 8 years, in both cases swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, how could I be associated in any way with a political party that so directly and intentionally defied and sought to undermine the Constitution in virtually every action that they took? This is... I'm not alone. When I announced that I was leaving the Democratic Party, I was very encouraged by the outpouring of calls and messages and emails and comments on social media that I saw from people from all across the country, many of whom were either still consider themselves Democrats but frustrated and angry with the direction the party was taken, or they had already left the party, or they're unaffiliated, and just, I don't even know the right word to use. To say discouraged is putting it lightly, about what's happening in our country, and recognizing that through that discouragement, through that hopelessness, by coming together, by speaking the truth, by not being afraid, not allowing them to kowtow us into fear, this is how we actually defend our freedom. And this is how we protect our Constitution.
The Harvard law professor, Alan Dershowitz, and his parents were both card-carrying communists. And he's not a Christian. He's Jewish, obviously, with Dershowitz as the last name. And he said, as I look at the right or I look at the left, I'm way more terrified of the left's totalitarian regime than the right, because it's controlling the speech. Everything is get in line, join the collective, because it's not about, that's what the Bill of Rights is. Our founding fathers knew, right? We need individual rights to protect us from the government. Exactly. What's your observation? It's true.
You know, the reason I joined the Democratic Party, I was 21 years old in Hawaii and looking. I didn't come from a family of like, okay, you know, my dad was a Democrat, his dad was a Democrat. My parents homeschooled all 5 of us kids. They taught us to be critical thinkers and actually like, okay, if you want to make this decision, you need to figure out what are the pros and cons, what are the consequences of going this route versus that route. And so I really started to look and think about, well, what party I was going to run for state house, and so I had to pick a party. And for me at that time, I saw a party that was a big tent party. It was a party that celebrated free speech, that welcomed people from all different backgrounds and different views, that actually worked with the ACLU at that time to protect and defend free speech, even for people who were not saying things that were popular or even acceptable at the time. You fast forward to where we are today, from that party that was the party of the little guy that has now become the party of the elite, of conform or else face the consequences, the party of censorship, the party that is taking away our civil liberties. And no, the Republican Party isn't perfect, but at least in the Republican Party, you see it play out if you ever watch C-SPAN on the House floor. There's a whole lot of free speech going on there. People complain, well, it's so messy, and why can't they just get along? And people ask me, like, why can't they just stick to the script like the Democrats do? Why can't they just toe the party line and just do this? It's like, you know what? Democracy is messy when it's working. And it's good to have debate. It's good to have different views, because that's when you're testing and you're pushing those pressure points of an idea or a policy, that's how we get to a better place and how we get to the closest thing to the right answer. And so it is encouraging, frankly, to see how in the Republican Party today, you know, it's unfortunate both parties aren't this way, but there clearly is a contrast between the two, where one is welcoming of diverse ideas and views and actual debate and standing up for free speech. The other party is not.
That free market of ideas is still alive and well in people that
It is alive.
It is alive.
It is alive. I don't know that it's well.
I'll give you that. It is alive. Tell me your perspective on, you know, when Eisenhower came back from World War II and served as the president, he said the greatest threat is the military complex in the future, because the power machine, very much, we were talking about the pharmaceutical, it's a monster now, but so is the military.
Yeah. To think about a guy who's a 5-star general coming to the end of his presidency, and the warning that he chose to sound for the American people was about the military-industrial complex and its cozy relationship with members of Congress. Unfortunately, leaders did not heed that warning, and that relationship is cozier now than it probably ever was before. You know, you look at these multi-billion-dollar spending packages that the Biden administration now is touting, and even Mitch McConnell saying, well, hey guys, this isn't really about Ukraine, this is an American jobs package. As a soldier, and I've served in 3 different war zones, I'm 21 years now serving the Army Reserve, it makes me sick. It really makes me sick to hear that, because there are wars being waged right now that President Biden himself could have taken a leadership role in ending long ago. So on the one hand, they say they care for the people of Ukraine. And on the other hand, they are stopping very real efforts to negotiate peace treaties to end this war, and using our taxpayer dollars to continue to fuel it. They're waging a proxy regime change war against Russia and using the Ukrainian people and their lives as the fodder. And then as more and more Americans say, hold on a second, this has been going on for a very long time. We have a heart for the people of Ukraine. How is this actually helping them? Oh, don't worry about it. This is actually an American jobs package, and this money is staying in America. Never mind the fact that it's going to the biggest defense contractors who are raking in billions and trillions of dollars from us being in a constant state of war, and those who may work in those companies on the assembly lines, for example. What slice of the $60 billion are they getting to take home as we see ever-increasing inflation and the few dollars that they make going shorter and shorter and being able to buy groceries for their families? The brazen arrogance and disregard for the well-being of the American people and the people of Ukraine who they claim to be wanting to help is just disgusting. It's disgusting. They have the blood of these people on their hands because they were in a position to be able to end this war, and they actively stopped people who were bringing the Russians and the Ukrainians to the table and said, no, no peace. I don't believe a word they say. They don't care. They don't care for them, and they don't care for us.
Well, they sent Kamala Harris there to announce that Ukraine should become a member of NATO. I mean, it's
on the eve of Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
Yeah, so if you want to go poke the bear, literally, the Russian bear, that's the way you, and I don't think, I mean, she's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So
she's not?
So somebody gives her that script and
says, what makes you say that?
Says, go there. Go there.
Did you not see the video about falling from the coconut tree?
But somebody, the administration sent her there with that script.
You're not even going along with me, man. Come on. Okay,
I'm a pastor.
all right,
I have to be decent, and like I had all these thoughts going through my mind, and I just like if I say any one of them, it's on video. Okay, all right. But you know, the administration has to send her there to instigate. I mean, where they could have, like you said, just brought about peace. Well, we want to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time, Tulsi.
Am I allowed to tease the pastor?
Yes.
Did I just get in trouble?
No, you did not.
Okay, all right,
No.
just checking.
No, we're ending this right now. No.
It's like, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm getting the yank here, guys.
This last question is, are you concerned with war coming to America or war erupting in America?
The greatest threat that I see for our country is coming from within.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Russia is not going to come and invade our borders.
No.
I heard a member of Congress, as he was arguing for this latest multi-billion-dollar package for Ukraine, criticizing members of Congress who were saying, well, we should actually secure our own borders, saying, well, Russia is at our border. The Russia-Ukraine border is our border, said this Democrat member of Congress. And my first thought was like, maybe you should look at a map. Let's start there.
Yeah. Basic geography.
Basic geography, but also I've been to your border here. I was here a few weeks ago in San Diego and spent a few days so that I could see for myself. A lot of the attention goes to Texas and Arizona, but very little attention is being paid to your border right here in California. And I knew that the borders were open before I went and visited, but I was with a couple of friends who are veterans who live there in San Diego, and what I saw was a well-oiled cartel-run machine. People flying into Tijuana, because I went and talked to these people. They were walking and they were laughing and joking. They had snacks and they had cell phones, they had everything they needed. They knew exactly where to go, and they came across the holes in the fence. They went and waited for Border Patrol to come pick them up because they knew that as soon as Border Patrol picked them up, they go and they get processed. Within 24 hours, they've got a free plane ticket to anywhere they want to go in the country. And so I talked to them, where are you from? How did you get here? Oh, I flew here through Tijuana a few hours ago, came across the border, and I'm going to go see my girlfriend in Utah. Have you been here before? Yep, I've been here before. We saw gang members from Venezuela. We saw people who came from Egypt. We saw people who came from all over the world. We have a grave domestic national security threat right here at home. The Biden-Harris administration's foreign policy has put us in a far more dangerous position than we've been in a long time, with multiple wars either being waged or bubbling up in different parts of the world, and this ongoing escalation against Russia putting us to the point where we are at a greater risk of nuclear catastrophe than we have ever seen before, whether it be one that is sparked intentionally or because of some misunderstanding or miscommunication. A nuclear war that would be the end of humanity and civilization. That is not hyperbole. That is the truth.
What could possibly be the advantage besides the basic narrative? Open the border, Mayorkas is not doing his job, they're flooding across, they're coming from every nation in the world. I mean, they're terrorist nations, radical Islam, everywhere is coming, Chinese. The people are flooding in, and the administration knows it. I mean, they say it's all peaches and cream, but we all know it's not. I mean, it's like everything, non-reality. Like this is a delusion. The agenda, is it to get them in, put them on the payroll, get them on the voting rolls, we'll be in party forever. It's kind of like packing the court, but we're just gonna flood in. All these people are now on the government rolls, and they'll vote for us because that's how they're gonna get their check, their cell phone, their plane ticket. Is it more nefarious than that, or is it just that simple? What's your observation, Tulsi?
I mean, the two obvious things, and it's probably not the whole picture, but the two obvious things is that they have created the narrative that if you are not for illegal immigration, you hate brown people. You're a racist. You hate immigrants. That's the narrative they've created for years, and this really was amped up under President Trump's presidency. So now, and they called President Obama the deporter-in-chief back when he was president. And so how do they then put themselves in a position where they're actually enforcing a secure border and deporting illegal immigrants and sending them home when they would then be calling themselves racist and anti-immigrant? So they've put themselves in this box, which is why they are not enforcing the border and securing the border at all. But secondly, it is what you're saying, that there's a political advantage to this, both in the short term and the long term. The short term being that they earn the favor of the AOCs and the squads of Congress, but also they believe that, well, at some point, and even in some counties and cities and states, people are getting driver's license, illegal immigrants are allowed to vote in local elections, are allowed to serve in public office in local elections. This very quickly leads to a place where, well, yeah, of course, we'll be able to turn certain districts or certain states that have traditionally voted Republican to vote Democrat. They are definitely playing the long game and looking at this from a very self-serving political position.
And it's really a worldview to, this whole white Christian nationalist narrative to make it sound like it's some kind of Nazi German. I am a Christian, I am white, and I love my country.
Yes.
So therefore, I guess I am one of them, right? But it's a globalist mentality that there should be no borders for nations. We saw it in Europe, right? Islam came into France and Germany, and it's really overrunning, and that's not Islamophobe. It's not xenophobe. Every country, France, I don't care what country, you should have sovereign borders. We have a great, very generous immigration program legally that people have come from all nations, all colors, doesn't matter what color or speech or language. And it's crazy.
It is, and it has the potential to destroy the fabric of not only our country, but civilization. And I'll just touch on what you brought up. You brought up a lot of different points, but when you look at this threat, what is the threat of radical Islamism? Well, we're seeing it play out on college campuses. Yes, there are terrorist acts that are being committed, and there is an ideological warfare that's being waged. We are seeing how those who don't have any strong ideology, whether it be religious or rooted in the Constitution, these kids are very vulnerable and susceptible to this pro-Hamas terrorist Islamist ideology. But what is their actual objective? Islamism is about political governance being ruled by radical Islam. That is literally the definition of Islamism. And we have seen how they have successfully, largely through these open borders and largely through immigration, how in countries like France, I think it's 25% of the country falls under Sharia law. It is not a stretch of imagination to see how that will continue to spread. That is their objective. It's been their objective for hundreds of years. They are not stopping, and our leaders across different administrations have failed to actually carry through on what we heard after 9/11 from President Bush, which was we will wage both a war against terrorism and an ideological war against radical Islam. Well, they never waged the radical Islam part of that ideological war, and whether it's because they're intellectually incapable of waging that war, or it was because, as we were seeing with President Biden, he's so afraid of being called names, Islamophobe, and being targeted by these activists that he's doing nothing. He is doing nothing, and instead allowing them to run rampant, commit acts of violence, break the law, disturb the peace, and force, in this case, these Jewish kids and professors and faculty to go home and take virtual classes. this is the greatest short and long-term threat that we face. And if this ideological war being waged by radical Islamists is allowed to continue unchecked, we should not be surprised to see communities in our country adopting Sharia law.
We're, in this last question, we see so many things. The anti-Semitism right now that is huge on the Ivy League campus. I mean, it's all over, but it seems amplified there right now at this moment, is a harbinger to really what we saw in World War II. It's like push, rewind, and play, and it's saying it's troubling is an understatement.
It is. It's an understatement, and it's it is a serious reality check and should be a wake-up call for those who have said over and over again, never forget. Every year when the anniversary comes around, when you visit the Holocaust Museum, if you have been to Israel, it is a constant reminder of why we must never forget. But what we are seeing now is an everyday, living, breathing, in-your-face reminder of how this can happen and is happening in some ways already around the world, and how few people, really in the grand scheme of things, are willing to stand up and speak out against it. That's what's most troubling to me, is that we have leaders in our own country who have a hard time calling anti-Semitism out for what it is, and denouncing those who are verbally pro-Hamas and chanting on the streets or on the lawns of Columbia University. I hope October 7 happens 10,000 times over again and again. They're not hiding what their goals and their aims are, and we should all take notice, and we should all stand, just as we should speak for each other when one another is attacked. We must stand strong in solidarity with them.
Thank you, Tulsi.
Thank you.
Thank you for your voice. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for having a backbone a mile wide. And it's a joy to have you. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Aloha. Thank you, everybody.